Two Davids Walk Into a Bar was filmed in front of a live studio audience.
This is David Anderson, and you're listening to... What are we listening to, Mr. Lawler?
This is, I guess, Two Davids Walk Into a Bar, the history of cable.
Two Davids Walk Into a Bar. I'm here with Mr. David Lawler, the author of Vintage Cable Box, which you can find on blissville.net and vhsrewind.com. Great articles. I've read them. You should read them. What would you say? Should they read them?
This was probably that series of articles I wrote, essays about movies, was mainly from my experiences first moving to Tennessee and getting cable for the first time and having channels like HBO, Cinemax, and the Movie Channel. We're talking about HBO tonight, and this was at the height of what was so incredible about cable, how suddenly all these movies became available, because we mentioned in the previous episode that HBO started as an experiment in 1972 in a very small community outside of Philadelphia called Wilkes-Barre. It became a very big thing, but in the 70s, it was still like a very limited library, so HBO decided to kind of embellish their programming with original programming, and what they did was they had stand-up specials. They introduced George Carlin to the world.
Yes,
as that
basically
comedian.
An HBO mainstay, I guess, basically until the end, although he kind of tapered off on the specials a little bit kind of near the end because he was old, I guess.
Yeah, he was probably in ill health. But
he'd be cranking them out like every couple of years. You'd see the new... And he kind of went through these phases of he was kind of coming at the kind of near the end of his class clown thing. Mm-hmm. And then he went into his...
And then he got into his more political philosophy.
Well, before that, he did
anger.
The whole thing with Stuff, which was genius.
Yeah. Oh, and HBO, to mention all of the comedians of that time that it introduced. Not just people like Robin Williams, Billy Crystal, Whoopi Goldberg, but also Comic Relief, the show they hosted. You remember that? 1985.
The Rodney Dangerfield specials, like Rodney Dangerfield presents the Young Comedian special.
Young Comedians,
like
and they had everybody from Sam Kinison to Louis C.K., Janine Garofalo. I mean, these are people you actually know by name. Nowadays, there's so many quote-unquote comedians that aren't really funny anymore, and they're not permitted. They're not permitted to be funny anymore because apparently comedy hurts people's feelings.
Oh,
we
it
can't
does.
have that. And but you know, I mean, HBO would also splinter off and form HBO Downtown Productions, which would then produce content for what became Comedy Central.
Yes,
and
that was a whole other.
They were the premier. They were the premier cable channel of comedy and sports. They would show Wimbledon, that kind of stuff.
For the longest time. Now I believe it's on NBC now, I believe.
Yeah. I want to, let's start with you. You had it, did you have it earlier than me? If I had it in 84, when did you have it?
I got it, and I said this in the first part. When we got HBO, we got the very distraught, sweaty cable man that I had to give him water. This kind of gives you a time and a place. He asked for water, which is fine. Mm-hmm. So I gave him a glass of water in a Great Muppet Caper glass that we had.
Now, was this in the days of bottled water or tap water?
Oh, this would have been tap water. This is 1981.
So Cracker Jack's and tap water. That's all he had to use.
Cracker Jack's and tap water. Yes. He took a Cracker Jack.
Cracker Jack was coming out of my dog. I was waiting for the surprise.
But yeah,
he took a Cracker Jack.
And so,
people should say that, by the way. I gotta go. I'm gonna go take a Cracker Jack.
It depends on what you ate, I guess. Maybe you would actually take a Cracker
another
Jack.
Carlin gag where he says, I don't want to hear when people have to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. I'm going to take a shit. Never mind.
I would actually tell people that because maybe they'll
don't tell me about it when you come out. Boy, you should have seen. Never mind.
I would tell people about that.
It set off the smoke alarm. Never mind.
But okay, so cable installed. I just want to say because we moved in, I just want to say August 81 in the new place, had cable. We pretty much got that cable installed pretty quick, like maybe within a week.
Yeah.
And got HBO in one room, Showtime in another, again, because you couldn't duplicate services, otherwise they'd charge you. So we couldn't have HBO and Showtime on both boxes, otherwise we'd have to pay like 4 times.
Tried to screw you.
And so HBO in one room. I'm trying to think of my early HBO, like I think I said, like Wife Mistress. Yeah. I don't know. I'll have to find that movie.
Sorry,
I think it's slightly dirty.
Robert
movie,
Wagner and Joe Claybor, and you can see all of them. I mean, like more than you ever needed to see.
Ooh, that sounds lovely.
I don't know. I was just making that up. I'm thinking Wife.
I think it's a foreign movie. It
what
feels
did you
like
say?
a foreign
Wife
movie.
Mistress? Did you
Wife Mistress? I believe.
So
one
it could
word.
be like something like Nastasia Kinski or
Yeah,
Valerie
I think it was like a foreign
Kaprisky
movie. Yeah, something like that. It's a little,
like European softcore porn. Do you remember a movie called Boarding School with Nastasia Kinski?
I don't remember that one.
It's about a group of boarding school girls, obviously from the title, who decide to sell their sexual services to the boys' school across the lake.
Well, that's just good business model right there.
Of course it is. That's brilliant. That's exactly what you should do. But it was based on this book called The Passion Flower Hotel, which Stanley Kubrick had optioned. He wanted to make that movie, but he never got an opportunity to.
I'm trying to think of like now, and we'll get into it. Like I have like memories of like watching the after hour stuff on Showtime, but we'll probably get to that when we get to Showtime.
Right now we're talking about HBO, which
right now we're talking about HBO.
It tried in vain to be a family channel because it provided family programming. It wasn't just
they were, and I remember like early.
And they would show our movies maybe later in the day, 7 o'clock at the earliest.
Early HBO was not a 24-hour service. I was able, when I got cable, it was just near the end of them not going over to, like, it was the very beginning of them turning, like they turned over to 24-hour, I think in January 82, I believe. Mm-hmm. I remember watching a lot of like the kids programming.
Yeah, they went off the air what time? 2 a.m. before that?
Something like that, 2, 3 in the morning, and then they come on at like 5.
Back on maybe 5.
And what was great about it was they, at the time, this was before there was a Disney Channel. So they had like some sort of like contract to show Disney movies. So there'd be a lot of like the Cat from Outer Space.
Yeah, I would remember that the Disney movies would be more like live action stuff, like maybe The Parent Trap, Freaky Friday.
That was pretty much all Disney had at the time. So it'd be like North Avenue Irregulars and like a Herbie movie or something.
Yeah. I remember The Love Bug. I used to watch that constantly.
And so it'd be stuff like that. And then let's see. Then they'd get into like actual movies, like around like 6 or 7, and then.
Well, they would also have like your video jukebox. They would have
jukebox. That would be a little bit later, but yeah.
And they would have Fraggle Rock, of course.
Fraggle Rock, oh yeah.
For kids, I mean that was like the big thing. I remember watching Fraggle Rock even back then.
That was one of those things where I could watch it on the CBC channel too, because it was co-produced with the CBC. So it would be that's why when Gobo, sometimes they'll say, "Eh?"
Yes.
That's awesome, eh?
Yes.
Probably one of the Canadian puppeteers.
Yeah. Now HBO and Cinemax were both run by the same company.
Yes.
So what I remember was that if you had HBO and Cinemax together, 2 different movies would premiere on a Saturday night. What I remember of that time, National Lampoon's Vacation premiered on HBO, and Psycho 2 premiered on Cinemax.
Well, that's just all kinds of fun.
Now, what was great about that is if you wanted to watch Psycho 2 first, so we watched that. And then later that night, HBO would rerun National Lampoon's Vacation anyway. So you'd be able to see it. And sometimes there would be this weird polar vortex or perfect storm going on where they'd be showing the same movie at the same time.
Really?
War Games, for example. And I remember flipping back and forth between the channels to see which picture was better or which picture was different. The HBO picture is a little more color than the Cinemax picture.
It literally may have had to do with like what they were getting off the satellite, like the quality of the satellite they were getting it off of.
It might have been. And sometimes HBO had the better sound, and sometimes Cinemax had the better sound.
I have a memory of watching one like The Final Conflict. It was on HBO and Showtime at the same time.
Oh, really?
And I was going back and forth between rooms, like that. That was what was entertaining at the time, of like
just
going
running back and forth. Is it doing it in here? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Is it doing it in here? Yeah, it is. So HBO also began to run programming for adults. Shows like Not Necessarily the News, which was and still is the most influential outside of Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update. Well produced and in mainly kind of a skit form, but it was relevant to current politics at the time, what was going on, the Reagan administration, things like that. I looked at a couple of episodes of Not Necessarily the News, and it still holds up. For people that can remember that time period, it still holds up.
I know that Rich Hall made a ton of money off with his Sniglet
Sniglets.
Sniglet books. Like, he basically just made up words, and so now he's a rich man because of that.
And then Rich Hall would kind of be co-opted by Saturday Night Live. He became a member of their cast.
Saturday Night Live would co-opt everybody. Like, they take all the SCTV people. They take him. They take basically anybody. And that was when they had the sort of their all-star season, when they had like Billy Crystal and.
They had Billy. Yeah, they had Billy Crystal. They had
Christopher Guest.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus was still on the show.
She was still on.
Yeah, Chris Guest, Brad Hall, Rich Hall, Jim Belushi. Pamela Stevenson, people like that. HBO continued like that, and again, I have to consider that the most perfect period of cable television had to be between 1984 and 1986, because there's just so many different kinds of movies that were suddenly becoming available for cable.
And that's interesting, because and maybe this will go into our talk about satellite programming. That was around the time that they did scrambling on the satellite. They figured, because by then, not until 85 did they actually start scrambling, because people were able to pick it up off the satellite for free.
Right.
And that was when they started. And there was a weird thing where they were showing the film Falcon and the Snowman. This is the Captain Midnight. Some dude hacked into the satellite feed and said, $12.95 for HBO, no way, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then they were able to fix it very quickly. Like, that was around the time they started. And look, you want a product and people are watching it for free, by all means, scramble it. It took a couple of tries for them to actually perfect the scrambling on satellite. It was called Video Cipher. Then they had to do Video Cipher 2,
right? Because
that got hacked. Ever since then, and then they had DigiCipher, and like these digital encrypted ones, I don't think they've been hacked. Like, you would basically need to work for them to be able to even start to hack it, and it's just too complicated.
Alas, the HBO experience was ended in 1986 for us when we moved back up to Philadelphia to, of course, an area that did not permit cable TV, but it did permit individual satellites that you can install. Very small little things, and these things look like they were made of copper. They look basically kind of like antenna material, but shaped into a small little satellite dish.
Are they UHF antennas?
They resembled them, and if they picked it up, the signal, it wasn't as crystal clear as the cable television that we had back in Tennessee. It was a really kind of a wormy image. Didn't look that great, and it cost $30 a month just for the one channel, just for the HBO. But we were so hooked on HBO, we had to have it.
Yeah, once you get something like, and remember, like the time frame we're talking about here, like that, having something like that is kind of mind blowing, because that's all you have is you can go to the theater and see. At the time, we thought crappy movies. Now we love them because we're old.
Oh yeah.
But it's like you could either go to the theater, or you could buy like a what would cost now like $5,000 VCR.
Yeah.
And watch tapes, and they would wear out and they'd be nasty.
Yeah.
And so but to be able to have a continual stream, it was almost like the streaming of its time when you think about it. A continual stream of new movies that just came out within the last year, and classics occasionally, where it would just be over and over, these new movies just coming at you. And even though that's $30, you see 5 or 6 movies.
How come? I was curious about this. If you have a VCR and you had cable system, you tape movies right off of cable.
Yes.
How come they didn't give you shit about that, but they gave you shit about duplicating videotapes? That you go and rent videotapes and then dub them if you have 2 VCRs. They never went after people who just.
I think the point was that they're getting you. I think the point was they're getting you twice. Like people, the economics of it would be like you literally like rent movies, but then you would also see them on cable, and then you'd watch them on cable. So they're double charging you.
Yeah, but if I were like an enterprising individual at that time with the cable and the VCR, I could set up my own lucrative pirating business where I could just tape movies off of cable and sell them.
By the time they'd hit cable, they would have already had their run in the video stores.
Well, they would have, but you get to own it. I mean, you could sell it like
and
it
then
was
you
a
own
videotape.
it. Well, yeah, but then of course, the sell-through price eventually would become, they would figure this out. It took them a while, but like eventually, when you would buy a movie, you could buy a movie for like $8.
Yeah, but consider this: All the President's Men is playing on Cinemax right now. I've got a VCR. I tape it at SP or whatever, or LP, good quality, whatever. It's available on Warner Brothers in the clamshell for $80. I go and I turn around and say, hey, You want this All the President's Men? It's complete, uncut, $5. I'm going to get $5 for it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it seems like it would be much more profitable.
I think they didn't care. I think it was because, like, the 1984 Betamax case basically settled that yes, you can make money, or you can't. As long as you don't sell it. If you sold it, it would be illegal. But like if you just for private home use, and most people, it became so cheap it was not worth it. It's kind of like. Now it's like stuff is relatively cheap for what you get for what you pay. That's why the piracy is almost like sometimes like people will pirate just because they're lazy. There's always going to be a certain percentage of people that are just want to break the law. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah, but there were plenty of fun opportunities to break the law. I had such an enormous collection of movies back then because I had the 2 VCRs.
I mean, hey, I still have my tape of, like, you want to talk about teenage HBO memories. It's got, let's see, I may still have the tape. It's recorded extended play though, and it's worn out because of certain scenes. It's got Fraternity Vacation and Life Force recorded off of HBO, like on one tape in extended play, and it looks horrible. But man, lots of memories go along with that, so that's why I kept it.
Yes, and now it's become almost impossible to kind of even find pirated stuff anymore of any passable quality because of all the all the copy protection built into everything now. So moving forward with the satellite, the little tiny satellite that we have for $30 a month, going into, I guess, 1987, before we came up to New York. This is when we had programs coming on like The Hitchhiker. If you remember, that was an adult-oriented kind of horror anthology, but it was a lot of fun to watch. I really did enjoy watching it.
It always messed me up when they changed Hitchhikers. That they had one guy the first season, and then they had another guy for like the next 3 or something. And I was like, hey, he's not the same guy.
And then after that, of course, in the 90s, you have Tales from the Crypt. Another just really excellent show. It offered an alternative, and what's more, it kind of started to kill the networks a little bit because HBO was competing seriously.
Well, and this is around the time, like, because, like, you have the Emmys now, but there used to be this thing called the Cable Ace Awards.
Cable Ace Awards, yes.
And they would have their awards, and they'd win. Like, at some point, either they got rid of it or it got folded into the Emmys because now HBO competes with HBO, Showtime, and all the other cable systems.
They're
all the streaming services,
and also the Golden Globes does best.
That may have been some sort of weird union thing.
It gets merged in rather than best cable program. It just goes in with the regular lineup
because it's all basically, and especially now with streaming, it's all kind of just the same thing now.
That's right. Now with streaming services competing for attention, and they're taking that attention away from from the cable stations, Netflix, Hulu, who the hell else? Amazon Prime and CBS, and then all the other studios are going to try and get in on this. This is exactly what I was talking about in the previous episode, where the movie studios are getting in and raking in their own money and starting. Well,
they're just sort of changing. They're just sort of changing where the money comes from. They're probably still making the same amount of money, if not more, doing it this way. They're just trying to find the best way to get their content out to people, however they want to get it.
I would prefer. I didn't mention it by name, but it's referred to as a la carte service, where you should have one central provider of streaming entertainment, and then custom make your own package of what you want to see.
Well, I mean, you kind of do. I mean, you have your company that you get your internet from, and then you can kind of do that. Like, you can get these. There's this new. I don't know if you heard of it, called Sling.
I've heard of the Sling. Yes.
You get Sling, and you basically, and there's a few other companies that are similar, where it's basically, and DirecTV Now, where you basically can get a lot of cable channels, at least on one package. Like, you pay like $20 a month, and you get like low basic, or you get like Hulu. And when you get Hulu, you get now I think you're thinking of, like, basically pay one person, and then you get like Hulu and Netflix and Amazon.
Yeah,
you get all
I'd rather do that.
thing.
It's much easier in
and
my
maybe
life
one day they'll do that. But hey, everybody needs to get paid, so maybe I don't know. Maybe there's antitrust issues. I don't know. If we could just
hammer that out, it could be good. It could be really good and less troublesome.
For you.
Well, I don't think that. I'm sorry. I know you have the service, but I don't think CBS All Access is worth anything right now, it would be worth it if it could actually make programming people want to see rather than trying to rely on some back catalog. But right now, it's a network that's existing for one show. I know you said that your mother watches a show on that, but
yeah, she watches The Good Fight and everything. And there's a few good shows. And remember, all the old Star Treks. Although I thought it was going to happen this year, all the old Star Treks are supposed to just go over to CBS All Access only, but they're still on Amazon and Netflix. So I don't know. Maybe they extended that deal. I don't know.
I think what it is a lot of people. I mean, like the Star Trek shows are going toe to toe with all the new programming that Netflix has to offer. I can't speak to Amazon Prime, but a lot of people watch Netflix just so they can watch those old Star Trek shows.
Interesting.
And I got to say, I mean, I don't know what they've done recently, but their streaming quality is excellent, and even Deep Space Nine and Voyager are comparable. Like I said, it might be my TV. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think your TV is cleaning stuff up for you.
But it looks wonderful. I mean, and it looks.
Well, that's great.
It looks really good. Back to HBO.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, one of the first movies I looked at on HBO when it was on, when the cable guy with the southern accent hooks up my channel, Man with Two Brains, fantastic. That was such a great movie to watch.
Larry the Cable Guy?
It was a guy. His butt was hanging out like Dan Aykroyd used to do that plumber thing from Saturday Night Live. His butt was hanging out. And he's just,
Norch is the fridge that you want.
No, our cable box was a piece of metal that you could kill someone with. This thing had to have weighed 20 pounds, but it was all in this big or small.
Okay, so
it was actually.
It's not like the couple of pictures that I sent you of like what our setup was like, where it's like the one was the black kind of box with the turn thing, and then the other one was this sort of.
It had a rotary
Hamlin box.
It had a rotary thing that you had to turn to get the channels.
Yeah.
But it was solid metal.
Yeah.
And I think you plugged your TV into the back of it. It would do that thing but it didn't come with a remote. You still have to go up to it and turn it on.
Oh yeah, let me sort of I got a memory here, and this has to do more with the room where we had Showtime, but we had like two boxes and an A/B switch, which I don't think really improved the picture much. It was probably all snowy because of that. Where it's like because we had it all hooked up, and then we had the Zenith Beta machine there.
Yeah.
And then we could basically that way you could basically like record anything off of cable, but it was basically just basic cable with Showtime was with this black box. And
well, you were fortunate. We didn't even have a VCR yet.
Yeah, that's true. But you could record Showtime, but then if you wanted to watch something else, you could flip the switch, still be recording off of Showtime, and then be able to watch on the sort of the Hamlin sort of like slide thing, and be able to watch basically everything basic that wasn't Showtime.
Right.
And it was this complicated setup. I don't even know how I figured it out. I guess I was a kid and I had a good mind then. I don't know. But I don't even know how my dad figured that out.
Well, HBO still rules with its own kind of streaming that you get in addition to what if you have HBO, you get the streaming. You also get the HBO on demand if you want it.
Yeah, that's what I have with my cable right now. I have HBO on the cable and I have the DVR and everything. Mm-hmm. But if you put your information in, you can watch it on the HBO. It's HBO Go, and then they have another thing, and then you can basically stream it, and it's basically kind of like on demand but on the internet. And I prefer that just because I think that the picture quality via streaming on my thing is better than the cable that I have. So that's usually what I do. Right. Now, if I didn't have cable, I could just subscribe to HBO Now, which is basically the same thing, except it doesn't go through your cable company. And you put the HBO Now app in there, and I think you pay like $15 a month or something. Mm-hmm. And that's competitive with like a Netflix, you know.
It is. What had happened I want to say from the mid-'80s on upward through 2000 was that HBO got really big. It got really massive. And it started showing incredible shows. And we would actually be watching this stuff more than we would anything on the regular networks.
Yeah, I'm thinking like Sopranos.
Well, I wasn't a big Sopranos fan. A lot of people are. I had my fill with Martin Scorsese and Francis Coppola movies. But what I was watching was stuff like 6 Feet Under, Carnival, Deadwood, you know.
Yes, all good.
Just.
Oh, by the way, side note, Deadwood's coming back in a movie.
I have actually read that. My first reviews of Vintage Cable Box were in August of 2015. And my first 3 reviews that I put up were Swamp Thing. I had to because Wes Craven just died that week, so I had to put up a review of Swamp Thing.
I remember that being. I think that was an HBO exclusive because at the time they would have sort of interesting exclusive deals. This was before Showtime did their whole big thing where when they bought up the Paramount movies. Mm-hmm. They had, I believe, exclusives on there where I believe Abco Embassy, whatever you want to call them. A lot of the New World stuff.
Yes.
The various sort of odds and ends. I remember the movie Flash Gordon being an HBO exclusive, even though it was released through Universal, but I think it was produced by other people, and that might be why. Mm-hmm. It'd be a lot of the odds and ends were HBO exclusives.
I put up a review for Easy Money. I put up a review for Porky's. Yep. Porky's I'll never forget because I snuck out in the middle of the night to the living room, which was the only place we had a cable box, making sure my mother was asleep before I watched Porky's.
You know what? Oddly enough, I guess I have bad parents because I actually saw that in the theater.
Oh, Lord.
When it came out, and I'm like 10-year-old me went and saw that, and I'm like, I don't know if I did. If I had a kid, I don't know if I'd be taking him to Porky's. I don't know.
No, I would not. Well, we have a few movies that we just can't watch in front of Regan. Like, my wife got me Dressed to Kill on Blu-ray, and I'm not going to show that to my daughter. It's interesting.
Maybe you just give it when she turns 13. Just give her a whole bunch of movies and say, "Okay, you figure it out."
How about 15? Well, wait.
15. How about 18? How about 21? How about that?
So, I mean, it was such an incredible mess of movies that was being shown in that time period. Horror movies: The Sender, American Pop, Dr. Detroit, Endangered Species, The Osprey Weekend, The Big Chill, Amityville 2, The Possession. Oh my Lord.
Oh, I remember. Okay, remember Heavy Metal was like before it could come. It didn't actually come out on video until like 1997.
Yes, that's true.
Because of the music rights.
Music rights.
And what would happen was they showed it in its initial run. It would be on HBO. Like I guess like 82, 83 when it would be up.
Yeah.
And then it
disappeared after that.
And then it disappeared. But every few months it would pop up on Cinemax, and you would get lucky. Like that was how I was able to finally get a recording of it. Like in the early 90s.
American Pop had the same problem with its music rights.
That's another movie I saw in the theater. But both of those movies I saw in the theater.
You saw American Pop?
Yeah. Wow. Because it's a cartoon, you know.
Oh, yeah,
it's a cartoon.
It's kind of for adults. There's some boobies in there.
I know. I figured that one. I'm sure my parents figured that one out.
Kind of. But then there were great gems that kind of disappeared from theaters and then would show up on cable and become enormous hits, like
Hollywood Nights,
Get Crazy, Baby It's You. What else? Rhinestone, that movie with Sylvester Stallone and Dolly Parton.
I remember seeing that on cable, but that would have been like later 80s. Yeah, I remember that.
That would be 84, 85. Documentaries, lots of horror movies. I like I said, it was cable was like my film school education.
About documentaries, I'm having a flash of those Dick Cavett specials.
Dick Cavett.
He used to do these sort of Remember When. I remember that song.
I remember that HBO did documentaries about specific years. Like there would be a documentary about 1968, a documentary.
Yeah, I think he did too. He did Remember When, which was I think about a subject, and then there was another one I can't remember the name of it where it was like about a specific year. I think.
And then there was the hard hitting stuff, like the brutal documentaries like America Undercover series.
Or they'd completely mess us up and do real sex and gross us out.
Oh my goodness, real sex was so so strange because it was like normal everyday people.
I know, and it's gross. I don't want to see normal everyday people. I'm
getting involved in orgies and having these open relationships disgusting. And all that. But it was interesting because it's like, most of the time it's pretty people up on the screen. It's beautiful people I don't want to
have this weird combination of being aroused and grossed out at the same time. It messes me up, man.
And sometimes they would have really hot chicks who knew how to, foliate bottles and things like that. But this was like the best time because this was the time period from the 70s and the 80s. Movies from the 70s and the 80s would premiere on HBO and the movie channel and Cinemax. Yeah. So you had all these wonderful, just incredible
I'm having another flash of something where I saw in a video review magazine, although I think it was at the time it was called like Home Video Magazine. It's like from 80, it may have been like 80, 81. Mm-hmm. They were reviewing a satellite dish setup. So they had a satellite dish and they were showing a picture that they were picking up off of HBO.
Were you talking like one of those enormous satellite dishes that had to go on your front lawn or whatever?
This would have been the early 80s. This would have been what I had too, a big dish.
The big dish.
And they were picking up HBO. I guess they would have picked it up for free at the time if it was the early 80s. Mm-hmm. And they were showing a picture of something they picked up, and it was a James Bond movie. So they were showing a James Bond movie on HBO, I think it was either Goldfinger or it was one of those. It was like one of the early Sean Connery ones.
Goldfinger, the man with the Midas touch.
I'll just do the whole thing.
Wah, wah, wah.
But they were showing, and it's interesting. Something I thought of like, well, that was around the time they were showing them on ABC. So I guess that they had some sort of special contract to be able to show them on cable too.
Well,
because
hadn't they also been showing them on TBS or WTBS at the time?
Yeah, but that would be way later. That would not be until I believe the contract started for TBS. I believe starting in 1990. I think that's when they started showing them.
Oh, okay.
So this would have been like very early, but because I remember watching.
I do have a memory of From Russia with Love being on ABC.
Oh yeah, all those James Bond movies were on ABC, and they'd always get good ratings, and people would watch them, and it was stupid of them to let it go, but oh well.
You're the man now, dog.
Yes.
Okay, so let's jump back into the 90s, I guess. Well, actually, no. I want to go to. I want to talk about the HBO guides. I loved those guides. They were fantastic.
Every once in a while I would get, because you could go down to like the sort of the at the time I had Viacom cable, which would then become TCI cable, which would then become AT&T cable, which would then become Comcast cable. Mm-hmm. But you would go down to like the sort of the cable store, I guess you could call it, like sort of like the cable office, and where you get your box and everything.
Yeah.
And what they would send us was this thing called Cable View, which was, it would have like the HBO, the Showtime, and then later like the movie channel listings on it.
It'd be just sort of like a premium cable TV guide.
Yeah, and it was this sort of almost like pamphlet. It was very similar to those HBO guides. It was kind of like this kind of like square thing. It was kind of thin. But if you went down to the main office, you could get like the HBO guide and the Showtime guide.
Well, they would send it to us in the mail with our bill. Basically,
mm-hmm.
Like, kind of like what the on demand now does with our bill.
That's an early memory of mine too. You want to talk about early cable memory? I would be so excited when that guide would come. I would literally,
it was great.
I would go to the mail. I'd see, is the cable guide here? Yes, and I would take the cable guide, but then I wouldn't bring in the rest of the mail.
You know what I would do? I would scan that son of a bitch for what I was looking for was sexual situations, nudity, graphic violence. That's all I cared about. What you do.
I was just all over about it. I was like, I wouldn't mind.
It's rated R. It's rated R. It's rated R. Ooh, it's rated R.
I mean, it's just it's almost like quaint of like how desperate we were for entertainment at the time, and like at the time that was the shit.
How desperate we were for nudity, sexual situations, and violence.
Oh, I was. But I guess the reason was for me not being quite as excited about that was because I knew it was going to be there. And all I had to do was just put the channel on and wait. I was a patient child. I'm a patient man. Just put it on the screen. Some boobs are coming. I'll wait it out.
They didn't put like little bugs on the screen. They didn't try to truncate the time. It was like you paid for it and you got it. You got the whole package.
Showtime did that for a while. They would put a bug on and then it would go away. And I guess people complained.
Yeah, because you're paying money. That's my problem with
a lot of paying for it. Don't put a logo on it.
You know, for the streaming service like CBS All Access, $5.99, but you have to watch commercials. What the fuck is up with that?
Well, you can pay a little bit more and get no commercials.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's like, yeah, we're going to give you this program, okay, but we're going to put commercials on it unless you pay us more. It's very mafia.
Are you talking like Gene Simmons?
No. I was trying to sound like a mob guy. No, Gene Simmons would sound like this. Okay, it's called Kiss Vision. It's going to have Kiss 24 hours a day. There are going to be Kiss commercials, but you're going to have
the Kiss coffin.
You got that? You're going to have to do that, all right? I need to work on my Gene Simmons. It's not as good as it used to be.
Well, you could talk like Paul Stanley.
Kiss Vision is going to be so good out there for everybody.
It's going to be so awesome.
No, I do a better Ace Frehley where he sounds like this. Yeah. But I digress. HBO is mainly known now for things like Game of Thrones, which again, not a fan. I'm just not a fan of Game of Thrones.
Well, then you're just wrong, and that's okay.
And I have to say, it's kind of weird. We record movies on HBO, but we haven't gotten around to watching them yet. I guess maybe we'll get around to it this weekend.
Well, every once in a while you'll be disappointed because you'll watched. This was a long time ago, but you watched like the Independence Day Resurgence and you were pissed.
Oh my
It's like
God.
you went to all the trouble to record it, get the time, sit down with the family and watch it, and then you were pissed.
I'm totally gonna Malcolm McDowell somebody one of these days. Make them watch that and Last Jedi back to back, 24 hours.
Last Jedi is way better.
My problem is we don't have the guide anymore. I want the guide. I'm going to be able.
That's true. Now
I need to know when things are coming on, and I'm so busy, and I don't have time to scroll through the guide on my television.
The way that the way the cable boxes are set up is you can basically scroll through the guide while you're watching
and it takes fucking forever to search
and I
for
will
anything.
scroll through week by week. I will go every week. Okay, what's going to be on HBO this week? Okay, I'll record this. Now, since I have like the streaming version of my service, I can just go onto the app, open it up, and they'll show like new movies this month that came on.
Well, I mean, but can I just ask you? Don't you think it's a little more exciting to wait for something rather than have the power to instantly call it up? I mean, the thing I used to look forward to the weekend when I was a kid, because on the weekend we did things. Maybe we went to a movie. Maybe something was showing on cable television that was scheduled. For me, waiting was the fun of it, the anticipation, if you will.
The waiting is the hardest part.
But now it's like I feel like it's like I don't want total control over that, and I don't want to be like, well, do you want to watch the Shape of Water right now, or do you want to wait till it comes on or something? It's like nobody waits anymore for anything to come on. They just wait till it's premiered.
Maybe I'm different, but I'm like, I love the way that it's set up now. It's so much more convenient. I don't have to go through the guide, because I used to get, like, when I had the satellite dish, I get like a satellite guide and it would show, and I'd go through and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to record this. I'm going to record this. This is all back in the days of like having tapes and everything. It was a huge pain in the ass. Now I can just go through, okay, this is coming on, boop, this coming on, boop, hit the record button, boop, boop,
but
boop.
We had
or go on the streaming service.
We had the HBO guide, we had TV guide, you remember? And you would look at the TV guide to see when your favorite show was coming on, and if it was a new one or a rerun or something like that. And you had to wait for it to show up, and it was like waiting was part of the reward of whatever you were going to watch. Like when War Games premiered, I was like, War Games, that looks, I heard about this. I didn't get to see it in the movie theater. And then you have to get everything ready, right? You go, maybe you got some popcorn. You bring some popcorn in. You got your treats or whatever. You're waiting for 8 o'clock. 8 p.m. shows up. The movie starts. It's like an event. It's like a ritual. It's like going to the movie. Going to the movies is the last thing we have now, where we actually have to wait for them to start the movie, and you're not.
Yeah, I gotta say, maybe it's because of my schedule, but I haven't been to a movie since since I think May of, I think it was, I saw Solo. I think that's the last movie I actually saw in the theater, just because of my weird schedule of. Now, I was thinking about this. My schedule is such that I could do those midnight screenings no problem now because of my weird schedule, and I might do that for Star Wars when the new Star Wars comes out.
All right, and I think for the future, HBO. Well, for the foreseeable future, that is, HBO still wind up on top because of their original programming.
Combination of original programming and major studios and a lot of good content and just generally good stuff. Is like, if it's on HBO, it's going to have a certain level of quality.
And probably a lot of goodwill that they... because they were responsible for creating that new surge in new programming and in movies. All right. I think it's about time to wrap it up. I am running out of steam here.
All right. Yeah, I kept you up late. Sorry.
I would be up anyway.
Oh, okay.
And I did get Regan's lunch and dinner ready. All right. So let's wrap this up. I guess next time, what are we going to be talking about? Are we going to be talking about adult movies, Playboy? I think. Do you want to?
That would be awesome.
Well, all right. Well, yeah. We'll...
As that guy said, that would be out of sight, dude.
That's a fucking excellent idea. To quote Grover, who I swear I heard him say that. I heard both sides of that. I listened to it a few times. I'm like, it's almost like when you look at something and you can see two different things in the picture. I'm pretty sure it was not a swear word if you listen to it the right way. All I heard was like the swear word. My wife and daughter did not hear it. They heard the other version.
I heard both. I listened for both, and I heard both.
No, I heard move the camera. That's a fucking excellent idea. That's what I heard. Okay, getting all goofy here on Two Davids. I am, as always, David Lawler, the Russian bot, and I was joined by David Anderson, the NPC.
Fuck you!
And good night.
Good night.
All right.
Yes, that sounds like an excellent idea.
Most of the big Hollywood blockbusters were on HBO, and that was that was obviously the better station. And then around that time, I had finally started watching horror movies. And then, of course, the big show that was on HBO was Tales from the Crypt. That's when I finally decided to ask my parents. I think when I was 10 years old, I begged them. I said, guys, can we please dump Showtime and get HBO so me and my dad can watch Tales from the Crypt? Because what I ended up doing was I rented the Tales from the Crypt VHS tapes that were available at the video store. Now, Tales from the Crypt came out in 1989, and you could at least get like the first season, maybe a couple other episodes from season 2 on VHS at the time. And me and my dad both loved that show. And that's when I think my dad finally convinced my mom, yeah, we'll get HBO so we can watch Tales from the Crypt. And every Wednesday night, 9 o'clock, that's what me and my dad did. That was the best thing. HBO had the best stuff. I mean, you had Tales from the Crypt, you had Inside the NFL, which were like some of the best show. Like me and my dad, we loved watching Inside the NFL. What is it? Dream On was another great show I loved to watch, even though I was probably way too young to watch Dream On. I loved Dream On. I thought it was a great show. I'm trying to remember some of the other shows I watched on that thing. I remember Cosmic Slop came on sometime in the 90s. I loved watching that, even though it was a little mini series.